One of the responses we get to this idea is that what we need to do is rediscover God, and so therefore we're going to go about this by giving a bunch of proofs for God. We were not going to talk about proofs of God in this catechism lecture. But in the West, this is a lot of times what happens. You notice what happens when we seek proofs for God? What are we doing with that mysterious ball? We're still standing outside of it. We're saying, I want to describe this in a way to prove to you that this is actually God right here. Because your face is turned away from it. And I want to get you to look at it. But those proofs for God don't seem to convince very many people. I don't know if you've ever looked into these, by the way. You can look at these online. Look on YouTube, proofs for God, and you'll find the 4 or 5 basic proofs for God. But there is one proof for God that I think is actually really quite convincing and helpful, and it's this one. It's the idea that if we live in a purely material world, just based in materialistic evolution, man wouldn't have a yearning in himself for something that he can't seem to find. Any yearning that would be baked into us by materialistic evolution should be found right in front of us, because we've been evolving for millions of years, and so man should be hardwired to be satisfied and fulfilled with whatever's right in front of him. But man isn't. Man isn't fulfilled with whatever's right in front of him. He's seeking something deeper, something transcendent, something grander. That in itself shows us internally that we recognize that there must be something greater and transcendent beyond just the material world that is there to fill us, to fulfill us, to give us purpose. We know instinctively that within us there's a part of us that yearns. And we know what it's yearning for. It yearns for God. Unfortunately, this yearning has been doled over and covered. And what we really spend a lot of time doing is trying to be distracted from that yearning. We're afraid of that yearning. And so we go to more entertainment. We go to more comforts. And a lot of times we go to addictions. We go to alcohol. We go to drugs. We go to sex. We go to whatever it is we can think of that will help us be so comforted that we no longer have to think about these deeper questions of life. But ultimately, we wake up the next morning unfulfilled yet again, feeling empty. It's funny because we even see this on TV, right? Even television shows. It's funny to me that the idea today is like we need our television shows to properly represent the populace around us. And so like every TV show needs a trans character today. It needs a trans character. But I'm like, but the majority of Americans for the past 40, 50 years have been Christian. And how many times have you seen a positive portrayal of a Christian on a sitcom? It never happens. Never happens. But even with the ones who are atheistic, what's a common sitcom trope that we see all the time? The sex-crazed character, right? Back in Friends, it was Joey. There's one show that I never watched, How I Met Your Mother. I don't know the guy's name, but like the skinny blonde guy, he was like the sex-crazed guy on that, from what I understand. I could be wrong about this. I've never seen it. But like this is a common sitcom trope. You have the sex-crazed maniac, and he's there for comic relief, right? And he's just going to sleep around and have fun doing that. But like 4 or 5 seasons in, eventually he has this realization where he goes, I'm tired of living this empty existence, and I need something deeper. I need real human connection. Like, even Hollywood knows that man is yearning for something greater and deeper. Even Hollywood knows this. Of course, they want to find it in just a simple human relation, and what will happen is if those sitcoms were based in reality, they'd get together, and they'd get married for a year or two, and then say, well, you no longer make me happy, and they'd leave, and they'd be miserable again. I mean, if we're going to be totally honest about it. Because we have something deeper within us. We know, in other words, that we're missing something. I think it was St. Augustine or maybe it was C.S. Lewis. I can't remember. Those are pretty far apart in history, but either way, who said that we have a God-shaped hole in our heart. Only God can fill it. So we know that as much as we try to fill that sense of purpose with things around us, earthly things, with success, with money, with fame, again, with material things, with alcohol, with drugs, we know that none of these things will actually fulfill them in the end. None of these things actually fills up that sense of purpose and yearning that we have deep within us. So, as I said, these classes, when we examine the nature of God and man, our golden thread throughout all these classes is going to be examining the relationship between the two, between God and man. Because it's only in this that we really discover the fulfillment of that deep yearning within us. Ultimately, the problem for man always narrows down to one thing and one thing only. It's the problem of death. Death ultimately is the final problem for mankind. But the problem of death cannot be conquered by itself with the expectation that if this alone is corrected and cured, all of man's other ills will go away. In other words, if I could give you a pill that gives you eternal life, you will never get sick and you'll never die. Unless you're hit by a bus, you're never going to die. Even if you knew you were going to live the next 1,000 years, if we live without purpose, we're going to live for misery for 1,000 years. Man doesn't want to just live and not experience death. He wants to live with purpose.